Okay, so today we're going to talk about how theorists explain personality. Like everything else in psychology, for the most part, the original theories of personality were largely based in philosophy rather than sort of more empirical science. So we're going to talk about theories, how they evolved, and how they think about personality, how they conceptualize personality, um, and we'll move from you know Freud all the way up to present day. Uh, Theories of personality have existed for as long as humans have existed, but we aren't going to go back all the way to Plato and Aristotle and what they thought of human personality. We just don't have time. So today we're going to talk about um, five different theories of personality. Okay, this is a nice overview slide. A personality theory is just a system of concepts, assumptions, ideas, and principles that are used to explain personality. We're going to start with the psychodynamic theory and move our way through to the trait theory of personality. I'm not going to go through each of these right now because you should be able to find this slide in our handouts. If not, I'll go make sure that it's there. And it's a nice overview. You need to be able to explain the difference between the different theories of personality, and this is a good slide for that. But we're going to talk about each of them individually. So first we're going to start with Freud. Our dear friend Freud, his mark is extreme as what he contributed to the field of psychology. Not all of it is supportive. In fact, a lot of it's not supported by research, so most of it's not in favor. But we utilize Freud's language in our day-to-day lives all the time. Okay, so Freud proposed the iceberg model of personality. Okay, so this is the psychodynamic model. He said that our personalities are based on three sort of mental persons, I guess, inside of each of us. And those are the ego, the superego, and the id. Okay. Of the iceberg model, you can see that the majority of the iceberg is underwater. And so that is representing our unconscious mind, okay, our unconscious mental structure. And it represents our basic biological drives. Freud said that really most of what we deal with, most of our personality, most of our issues come from those basic biological drives, okay? Hunger, food, water, sex, those kinds of things, okay? And so the id is that unconscious structure. You can see that the next part of the iceberg is the ego. The ego is a little bit in the pre-conscious, but mostly in the conscious. This is stuff that we're aware of. The ego is your rational self, and it attempts to gratify the id in socially appropriate ways. Okay, so you can think about these things as part of your personality and also part of your development. So Freud hypothesized that the id was the first thing you're born with. Okay, you're born with just an id. You just have basic biological drives, really nothing else. And then slowly you develop an ego, which is a rational self. So you can see, if this was true, that children around the age of 18 months, 2 years old, they're starting to realize that in order to get what they want, they have to do certain things, okay? So they start using their words, they start using language or signs or whatever to communicate what they want or need. Okay, so instead of just running up and grabbing the cookie, they ask their mommy nicely for a cookie and then they get one. So that would be a demonstration of their ego, their rational self, attempting to gratify the id in a socially appropriate way. Okay, and then the last thing to develop, according to Freud, is the superego. And the superego is your ideal self. It's where your moral standards and values are. It's obviously the last thing to develop. Okay, so we have these three parts in psychodynamic therapy or in psychoanalysis. The therapist will attempt to get information from the individual about their unconscious by tapping into the preconscious. And we'll talk more about that when we get to psychological disorders and treatment. Remember, this is all according to Freud. So there is only minor evidence for it. I'm not sure if you noticed that this is the Titanic down there. And oh no, who's that? It's Jack. Oh, he should have moved over. Okay, so that usually works in class. I don't know if it works online. So Freud, he said unconscious is really important. You have the id, ego, and the superego, and the balance among those is what tells us about who you are. So in a healthy person, the ego is the strongest and the biggest mental structure, balanced evenly with the id and the superego. In an overly impulsive person, the id is bigger than the ego and even bigger than the superego. And then in the overly controlled person, the superego is actually biggest, the ego is smallest, and the id is also large. Okay, so you really can think about it sort of like the angel and devil on your shoulder, the id and the superego. Hopefully your ego is biggest, okay? And you have to, your ego, you have to balance out those two drives, according to Freud, okay? So this is Freud's theory, the iceberg theory of personality. The next theory we're going to talk about is the humanistic theory. Okay, so the humanists, also positive psychology nowadays, they were very optimistic about human nature. They believed that humans are interested in realizing their potential, and humanism really contributed to the development of positive psychology over time. And so what we know is that the humanists were quite tired as a group of Freud. They were sick of not just Freud, but Freud's theories and psychoanalysis because of the assumption and the study of basically psychological illness as opposed to psychological health. And so the humanists were really the first to start studying psychological health as opposed to, illness. Okay. The father of humanism, his name is Abraham Maslow. We've talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs before when we talked about motivation, and he's thought of the father. There's some other key players, but he's who you need to know. Here's a clicker question. So one time Maslow said, it's as if Freud supplied us with the sick half of psychology and we must now fill it out with the health half. Okay, so Maslow was interested, like I said, in looking at psychological health and well-being, what that looked like. Okay, so the humanistic perspective on personality is simply that people are always going to strive for growth and to be a better person unless circumstances in life get in their way. Okay, so humans are going to be working towards self-actualization on that hierarchy of needs unless they're thwarted by some stumbling block along the way. Okay, the next theory we're going to talk about is the social cognitive perspective. So if I work hard, I'll get that promotion is a statement characteristic of people who... Clicker question. I'll give you a second to test yourself. It should be C. Not C. B. Have an internal locus of control. Okay, so the social cognitive perspective really applies the theories of learning and cognition to personality. Okay, learning, cognition, and social behavior. So basically, reciprocal determinism is a key characteristic of the social cognitive perspective, and that is that interacting influences between personality and environment exist. So we know that not only does your personality influence the environments you choose to be in, but also the environment can influence your personality. Okay, so you can see here in this lovely graphic that behavioral factors, personal factors, environmental factors, they're all interconnected and they all influence one another back and forth. So that two-directional error means that not only do personal factors influence behavior, but behavior influences your personal factors. Okay? etc., etc. So we've got interaction of all these things determining your personality. The social cognitive perspective also includes the internal versus external locus of control, which we talked about. Remember that with internal locus of control, it's the belief that I control my own destiny, that my behavior actually matters in the world, that's going to make a difference. When you have an external locus of control, you are in a kind of a give up mode. They control everything, everything I do doesn't matter, it's pretty useless. And obviously that's a depressing place to be in, and does not result in good positive outcomes. So if you feel like there's nothing you can do in life to make a difference, that's not a great place to be. So external locus of control, so things outside of me control what's happening. Internal, I believe I have control. Okay, and then the next part of, or the next concept in the social cognitive perspective is learned helplessness, which is really an extreme of an external locus of control. Basically, when uncontrollable bad events happen, you have a perceived lack of control, so external locus of control, and then you demonstrate generalized helpless behavior. So if nothing you do matters, why would you even do anything? And that generalized helpless behavior really hurts the individual, because obviously if you're not doing anything to get where you want to go, you're not going to get there. So that sort of generalized helpless behavior is called learned helplessness. And it's the idea that the person basically gives up and doesn't really do anything because they don't think that it'll make a difference. One of the key players in the social cognitive theory is Walter Mischel. He was more of a social psychologist, and social and personality psychology, though they often get lumped together, are really a little bit in opposition about how they feel about personality. So social psychologists really emphasize the power of the situation on the individual, and personality psychologists look at really the uniqueness and the consistency of the individual and their behavior. So that's super interesting, because Walter Mischel says, and social psychology says, that people's personality traits really are not consistent across situations. This is just an example with some data from 2 individuals and how the probability of a particular behavior changes over different situations. So you can see that there's much more variability between the 2 individuals, or within the 2 individuals, than between them. So you can see the lines cross over. So that's indicating that, although there is some consistency in individual behavior, the situation can really drive our personality. Okay, so the social cognitive perspective applies theories of cognition and learning to personality. And the last and really most popular theory for personality is the trait theory. So Allport was the first to sort of go down this road. He used a bibliographic approach. He determined that 4,000 words from the English dictionary describe personality, but most people could be described by about 10 central traits. And then Eysenck came up with a 3-factor theory, so extroversion, introversion, neuroticism, emotional stability, psychoticism versus impulse control. The most popular trait theory today, which is used in vast majority of personality research, is Costa and McCrae's 5-factor model, also known as the Big Five. Okay, these guys suggest that there are universal factors of personality, which means they apply cross-culturally, and each trait is associated with a behavior pattern. So we're going to talk more about each of the Big Five, but what I would like you guys to do right now is to check out this website, openpsychometrics.org, tests. If you type this into your search window, you can go and take a Big Five personality inventory and then see your results. Your results will look like this. Okay, and then we can come back and talk about this later.